Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, once again would like to welcome you to the 48th IPA Convention and Exhibition, gaining momentum to advance sustainable energy security in Indonesia and the region. I am very enthusiastic to see everyone here today. I heard that this year IPA is attended by 29 countries, so can we have a big round of applause for this important session we'll have today. And thank you everyone for coming to BSD City. So I am enthusiastic as well to see the energy of the room. Speaking about energy, I believe that word will be resounded a lot throughout the exhibition and conference. All right, now our first session of the day will address the crucial intersection of energy, business viability, and environmental sustainability. Now, fossil fuels that serves as the bedrock of global development have led to unprecedented economic growth. But at the same time, it also have fueled the rise in greenhouse gas emissions. Now, to combat this existential threat, global efforts such as the Paris Agreement and the Glasgow Climate Pact have been forged, aiming to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in its pace by achieving the net zero emissions by 2050. So oil and gas companies have faced challenges in trying to provide sustainable energy supply. So today, with the distinguished speakers of our top CEOs, we'll delve into the key themes, including company strategy for balancing stakeholder needs with decarbonization. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also inform you that we will have the discussion and we would be very looking forward as well for your interactions. So please kindly scan the QR code. This is for your questions. You will find the question box and you can submit your question there. And before we start our session, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session. He is the Research Director for Corporate Research at Wood Mackenzie and is the one responsible for Wood Mackenzie's corporate research in the Asia-Pacific region. Now providing the strategic analysis of the leading Asia-based national and international oil companies. Now, he has provided expert input on a number of consultancy projects, holding a Bachelor of Arts degree in Management and Investment Finance of Honours with Harwood University in Edinburgh. Let's welcome to the stage, ladies and gentlemen, the session's moderator, Bapak Andrew Harwood.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to moderate this panel this afternoon, the opening plenary session of this 48th IPA conference and exhibition. My name is Andrew Harwood. I'm part of Wood Mackenzie's Asia Pacific corporate research team, and we're proud knowledge partners of today's conference. I'd like to make some opening remarks, and then I'd invite my fellow panelists up to the stage, and then we'll kick off with the proceedings. So the energy transition is not moving fast enough. At COP28 in November, it was revealed that no major country is on track to meet its commitment to a Paris-aligned pathway of 2 degrees or lower. Governments are prioritizing energy security in a world turned upside down by the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The low-carbon energy system that the world wants, that will eventually enhance national energy security, will take many years and many trillions of dollars of investment to build. Many of the new technologies required are not commercially viable without huge subsidies and fiscal support. And economics have been further eroded by higher interest rates. For governments and politicians, there is currently little appetite for the significant investment and the strong policies required to accelerate the transition. This will have implications for the outlook for continued oil and gas demand. In Wood Mackenzie's latest delayed energy transition scenario, global oil and gas demand will continue rising beyond this decade. Now, this uncertain outlook really highlights some of the significant challenges that the leaders of our industry are facing. How to position their organizations to be resilient to short-term volatility, whilst also remaining sustainable over the coming decades, all while continuing to generate value for their shareholders and public stakeholders. Now, today's panel features the esteemed leaders of companies that are trying to navigate these uncertainties while remaining open to the opportunities that will arise. So I'd like to invite my fellow panelists now to the stage. Thank you. So today I'm joined by Ibu Nicke, President Director and CEO of Pertamina. I'm joined by Tan Sri Tengku Taufik, CEO of Petronas. And I'm of course joined by Roberto Lorato, CEO of MedcoEnergi. So the format of today's session will involve each of my fellow panelists making some short introductory remarks in turn, and then we will follow that up with around 20-25 minutes of discussion. We would love to hear the questions that can come in from the audience. So as mentioned previously, please drop your questions using the QR code, and we will try and pick up on some of them as we go. But first of all, let me invite Ibu Nicke to make the first address. Ibu, you may use the podium, or you can stay seated. Up to you. Okay, yeah, you can stay there. So just by way of introduction, Nicke Widyawati is President, Director, and CEO of Pertamina since 2018, leading Indonesia's state-owned energy company. She's transformed it into a holding company with record high net profits in 2023. Internationally recognized, she ranked 51st in Forbes' The World's 100 Most Powerful Women 2023, amongst other awards. With a bachelor's in industrial engineering and a master's in business law, she has over 3 decades of experience in state enterprises, including PLN and Rekayasa Industry. And as the chair of the B20 Energy Task Force, she advocated for sustainable energy policies during Indonesia's G20 presidency in 2022. So I'd like to ask Ibu Nicke to make her initial remarks.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, I want to extend our appreciation to the IPA CONVEX that inviting me here amongst the prominent speakers, and who will be discuss the topic that is very interesting topic. How we can and have to properly manage between energy resiliency and environment sustainability. So we all know that after the Paris Agreement, all country and all energy company reformulated all the energy policy and strategic plan to embrace all the environment sustainability in their system. But then, unexpectedly, the COVID pandemic, the geopolitical issue occurred. and then make everything more complicated. The pressure in economy, the market volatility. And now, all of us in more pragmatic in manage the balancing of those energy trilemma. So I will start by showing this data about the World Energy Trilemma Index issued by World Energy Council that's showing how Indonesia managed the whole energy trilemma. After last year, we are now in 53rd rank globally. So despite the energy security exceeding the global average, but in overall, we are still fall behind the global average. Means we have to strengthening our energy resiliency, especially considering our government target to keep maintaining and also increase the economic growth rate by 7% up to 2045, and increasing our GDP per capita exceeding $30,000. Energy is a catalyst for economic growth. So we need to secure all the energy, and also at the same time, we also reduce the carbon to support the government target on net zero emission by 2060. Next slide. In addressing that issue, Pertamina, as a state-owned enterprise, try to reformulate our next strategic plan. We try to gradually adopt the energy transition. And we figure out our strategic planning by, we call it dual growth strategy. So we make a balancing between energy resiliency through strengthening our legacy business, which is oil and gas. And also we increase our development on low carbon business in order to meet the net zero emission by 2060. So this is our strategy to ensure that energy resiliency of Indonesia still keep maintaining, but we also support the government. We start with strengthening our legacy business by maximizing our upstream growth and also upgrading our refinery, integrating the refinery with the petrochemical, and also we built the integrated infrastructure, midstream and downstream, in order to strengthening our accessibility. From the Energy Trilemma Index, the most challenging part of Indonesia is accessibility, and the second issue is affordability. So we have to address this issue properly in our strategic planning. Next, something happened with. Okay, maybe I can also start. Okay, the dual growth strategy also become an anchor in our budget allocation for the next 5 years. We allocate more than 60% for the upstream business. Our target by 2029, we are self-sufficient for the crude oil. Currently, 1/3 of our crude consumption supply from import. So we will add our allocation, we will add our upstream activity to increase our production from now Indonesia is 700 to become double on the next 5 years. We also will add the capacity of the refinery in order to reduce the imported fuel and to increase the standard quality of our product, as well as LPG. Now, we still import around 85% of LPG, and we will also substitute the LPG with city gas. So that's why in our strategy, we put also 17% to develop the integrated gas business, upstream, midstream, and downstream. We believe that gas is a bridging fuel to shift from fossil energy to new and renewable energy. So this is a scenario how Pertamina can support energy security, energy affordability, energy accessibility, as well as energy sustainability. And we believe there is still a lot of potential in terms of sustainability in Indonesia. We can increase our program bioenergy, biodiesel, biogasoline, sustainable aviation fuel, and also carbon offsetting, such as natural-based solution and CCUS. We also understand that in terms of strengthening our affordability, there is two sides we have to improve. Firstly, is how we can provide the affordable energy for the people. But the second is very important, how we can increase the buying capability of the people through increasing industrial growth in Indonesia. We have local content policy from the government, and we try to increase the local content percentage every year, along the way from our upstream to downstream activity. So from our budget allocation for the next 5 years, we can contribute the additional or the value added creation to our GDP yearly is around 17 billion US dollar, and also can create the job creation is around 1.3 million people. Next. We also concern and put as a priority how Pertamina can support the government to achieve net zero emission. So we keep maintaining our ESG performance. Up to last year, we successfully reduced around 34% of our carbon emission from our internal process, upstream, midstream, and downstream. And with that achievement, put Pertamina in the first rank globally in ESG performance in industry, oil and gas, integrated oil and gas company. We are not stopping there. We still have to reach the lowest risk rank, mean it should be below 20. So we can categorizing become the low risk energy company in terms of ESG performance. Next. So one of our priority program is biofuel. We start with B35 currently, and we will add the blending up to B60. And from B25, actually we already reduced the carbon emission around 32.7 million tons CO2 per year. So we'll add more up to B60, comply with the national energy policy. Bioethanol, now we start from the non-subsidized fuel with E5 and E7 names the green, Pertamax Green 92 and 94, and we will add the blending up to E40 for all fuel. It is also comply with the national energy policy. And we will produce and already start to produce SAF with 2.4% blending SPO with our gasoline and also after. And our green refinery capacity now already improved, so we can process the SPO not just from CPO but also from used cooking oil. So the second technology generation applied in our green refinery right now. The gas development. Indonesia have abundant reserve of gas, many new discovery, more on gas. So we believe that gas has become one of our priority to develop upstream, midstream, and downstream, and not just for energy, but also to produce the chemical as an import substitution. So we produce the chemical from gas, we also can reduce the carbon emission around 2/3 of the total emission from petrochemical. Next. Okay, this is maybe the last slide. We also put a priority, this program, CCS, CCUS, with abundant reserve and storage potential in Indonesia. Now is 16 projects ongoing and 11 projects is Pertamina. So we have a target, we put a target to storage the CO2 in our CCS block is around 7,000 ton per annum CO2 by 2030. But the total capacity in Indonesia is more than 500 gigaton actually. So we are very ambitious in this program, and we also provide one integrated solution with, contributing by all our subholding, starting from CO2 capturing up to injection and sequestration. So this is all a strategy of Pertamina on how we properly manage the balancing between energy resilience and environment sustainability. And we believe that all the program, it also the key enabler, which is digitalization, sustainability, and human capital readiness is very important, as well as technology advancement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Nicke. Thank you very much for that overview of Pertamina's strategy to transition and support Indonesia's decarbonization. I think we showed the importance of energy during the talk, with the power going out. So it highlights just how important energy is to Indonesia. A little tip for anyone in the IT department, I always find if you unplug things, plug them back in again, they'll come back on. So just in case that happens again, there's a little free tip for you. I'd love to dive into the alignment between Pertamina's strategy and the government's strategy. Hopefully we'll have time for that during the discussion. But let's move on now to Pak Taufik. I'd like to ask him to make his remarks. Before he does that, let me give you a quick introduction. Tan Sri Tengku Muhammad Taufik is the President and CEO of Petroleum Nasional Berhad, or Petronas. He holds a Bachelor of Arts Honours degree in Finance and Accounting from the Strathclyde University of Scotland, and I understand he enjoyed himself very much whilst there. He's a Fellow of the ICAEW and a member of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants. He currently oversees board stewardship in several Petronas subsidiaries and is on the board of various international and industry-related organisations. He's a member of the WEF Oil and Gas Governors Community and co-chairman of the WEF ASEAN Leaders for a Just Energy Transition Community. He's also the Pro-Chancellor of University Technology Petronas. Please welcome Pak Taufik.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Esteemed ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope that I'm supposed to present is going to come up on the screen behind me, but you got a free tip from a Scotsman. Scotsmen are reliable, and thank you for that. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera. Saya ucapkan kepada bapak-bapak dan ibu-ibu yang amat saya hormati, kolega industri tenaga sekalian. Dalam kesempatan ini izinkan kami dan izinkan saya bagi pihak Petronas memberi ucapan terima kasih kami karena pihak organizer memberi kami kesempatan untuk menyampaikan sedikit pesanan. I want to express my thanks for the IPA organizers. Obviously, the IPA president is in no way related to Petronas. We've had no influence on the theme here. And for according us the platform to share our thoughts with a very distinguished group, Ibu Nicke and, of course, Roberto. It's a pleasure to return to Indonesia. From Malaysia, we share deep historical and cultural and linguistic ties, but now increasingly more as part of a greater region. And I see that reflected in the aspirations of the IPA convention. The regional ambition is very clearly stated. We now are pursuing greater ties between countries through strategic and trade relations. Such regional relations are now going to cut into the area of providing energy sustainably. And if I continue with my second slide, as the energy transition continues to unfold, that's the challenge that we are facing. They are seeing this rate of transition varying across many geographies. And the countries in Southeast Asia are no different. They're faced with comparable challenges, but each has a distinct and unique flavor, and they're attributable to geographical and developmental similarities. I thank Ibu Nicke for comprehensively unpacking the energy trilemma. It is something that any energy industry executive is now often faced with, and particularly in this region, where we are poised, going to this next decade and the remainder of the century, be one of the epicenters of global economic growth. The overall energy demand in this region is expected to see a 60% increase by 2040. That's a staggering number. And our steadfast commitment to combat the impact of climate change, which everyone in this region has seen. You can see the map behind me. We are a cornucopia of islands and an archipelago of bodies which are straddling a long body of ocean. Climate change, receding shorelines, the impacts of drastic weather changes is immediately felt. And all 10 countries in ASEAN are not climate deniers. We're all working towards delivering our nationally determined contributions as part of the Paris Agreement. And this is one thing I hope you park, because in the opening remarks, Andrew mentioned that there was a stocktake in Dubai, which said that countries are falling behind their ambitions. Now, I'd love to have that conversation with members of the audience, because what ruler are we using to state that we are behind, ahead, or on track? That is a big debate. Against this backdrop, the decision makers in Southeast Asia must now carefully thread the thin line and manage real trade-offs, making sure energy is affordable while meeting sustainability goals. There are barriers to achieving an equitable transition. And let me just cover that briefly here. Firstly, a large slice of the population in emerging economies still need access to a reliable and affordable energy source. It is a very different conversation when you speak to a citizen of a country where they cook with air fryers versus speaking with a citizen in a country where things are still cooked with biomass. Each face their own transition. And according to the IEA, all of the 775 million people in the world that lack access to electricity, the 2.4 billion that lack access to clean cooking fuels, live in emerging economies. So in an ideal world, we would endeavor to provide access to these basic necessities by immediately scaling renewables. But let's face the fact, that cannot be immediately achieved or delivered. I think it's already been expounded by the Minister, Right Honourable Minister this morning, and the Moderator, that these idealistic outcomes need to be doused with realities. Energy demand growth, as I mentioned earlier, with its 60% growth, far outpaces the proliferation of clean technologies. The second harsh and real fact is, on the back of the theory that capital will only follow where returns emerge, we need to accept that energy transition is a capital-intensive exercise. How intensive? The expectation is that we need to spend $2 trillion a year, every year until 2030, at least in emerging economies, to achieve net zero by mid-century. That's in the next 6 years. This is a 5-fold increase from the current $400 billion of climate investments originally planned or announced. So, for investors and financial institutions, as well as policymakers, we must all play our role. We need to facilitate access to transition financing, and not just for clean technologies, but also projects that decarbonize the existing energy system. This is where there's always a conflation. We think that clean needs to be perfectly net zero. Let not perfect be the enemy of good, and let's start decarbonizing systems. We need energy, and the enemy is emissions. So if we look at the impact of climate change on emerging economies, if we think about these economies only contributing 7% of annual global emissions, and imposing those set of rules, Southeast Asia, where we sit, is among the regions hardest hit by climate impact. From the torrential rain and floods that we have all witnessed and experienced last year and this year, to the sweltering heat wave that we are still experiencing today, our countries here must build economic resilience to bolster preparedness, i.e. we need to develop in order to contend with the effects of transition and adapt to climate events in order to safeguard the population from long-term adverse impact. So in view of these very real and immediate considerations, I believe, and Petronas' position is that countries must continue their own unique approaches to an orderly energy transition, so everyone can benefit from a just and equitable movement to a cleaner energy system. So this pursuit is what drives Petronas' energy transition strategy. As Malaysia's national oil company, Petronas is committed to carrying out its duty to manage the nation's oil and gas resources. And this is what we do. It is our task. We're charged under law to ensure that we pursue and develop economic growth while ensuring energy security for all that we serve. Now, as an international energy player with an expanding global footprint, we're immediately in the crosshairs of many stakeholders, and we have to elevate our ESG standards and performance. To fulfill these responsibilities, our strategy outlines 3 key priorities. The first, believe it or not, we still want to continue to strengthen our core business. We've all seen in recent times the repercussions and immediate impact of chronic underinvestment, and post-Ukraine, that led to an energy crisis. As the industry continues efforts to secure resources necessary to fortify renewable energy systems, the next system we're moving to, it's imperative that we also continue to explore, develop, and produce hydrocarbons, but must be differentiated. We can't do it the way we did before. It must be safe, it must be cost optimized, it must be efficient, and we must abate the emissions. So in 2023, we reinforced our global portfolio with new discoveries, new strategic partnerships, and targeted expansion to focus on high-value, differentiated resources. I'll be quick in the next few matters. We're honored now, and I have to put this on record, to be able to participate in the Indonesian oil and gas sector for over 20 years. We've expanded our portfolio, and we've further strengthened the signing of the growth of this portfolio with the signing of 3 PSCs in recent years, one very recently this morning, namely North Ketapang, Masela, and this morning Bobara. Petronas sees gas as an important component of the energy transition. So as well as gas producing low emissions and providing more efficient solutions, it is arguably not just a transition fuel. For some countries, it could be a destination fuel. So in order to bolster the robustness of our gas portfolio, we've started up projects elsewhere outside Malaysia. LNG Canada is expected to start producing in 2025, and soon we will see Petronas' third floating LNG facility complement our own Bintulu that in Sabah, Malaysia. Excuse me. We're also leveraging on our integrated gas experience to be implemented here together with our partners INPEX and Pertamina in Masela. These undertakings enable Petronas to continue much needed energy to our customers. It is our conviction you still have to continue on the hydrocarbons. So in Petronas, we believe that front and center on our agenda that we need the necessary decarbonization levers to work. So let's move to that slide with 4 levers. At Petronas, decarbonization projects are underway through 4 levers. We need to achieve and deliver energy efficiency. We move towards zero routine venting and flaring. We increase electrification. And of course, similar to my learned colleague to my left and right, we pursue storage or CCS. With our cumulative decarbonization, we hope that we will be on track to support the targets of Malaysia. But in Malaysia itself, our operations are targeted to have a capping of CO2 emissions at 49.5 million tons a year. We remain absolutely convinced that CCS plays a pivotal role in helping the world reach net zero, and therefore we are extremely heartened to see that Indonesia has defined its CCS framework under presidential decrees with such a clear and unconfused means of differentiating part of petroleum operations as well as it being part of infrastructure and services as an offering. We believe that CCS is an offering this region can use to differentiate itself from the rest of the world. In Petronas, we are doing this at home. We have a 3.3 million ton per year Kasawari carbon dioxide sequestration project offshore Sarawak. While we do all of this, we believe that Petronas sees CCS not as a burden, but also as a growth opportunity. We're capturing new growth opportunities in the cleaner energy solution sphere, and this is the third component in our energy transition strategy. As you have heard, and I have a representative here from our company, the clean energy vehicle is Gentari. To date, Gentari is pursuing 2.9 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. It has 699 charging points up and running, and 3,000 EVs registered as a vehicle as a service. It is seeking partnerships, so the executive who's here is here not only to avail himself to delicious Indonesian offerings, but he's here to work on business development opportunities. All that said and done, I think I will go back to the point of this being a need for collaboration and partnerships. At the policy level, we have 41st ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting held in Bali last year, and I think aspirations such as the ASEAN Power Grid and Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline must be pursued and realized to enable the regional energy security this region so sorely needs. Indonesia has followed through at country level with national energy policy and just energy transition partnerships, and they've complemented these policies, and kudos to the government for keeping its direction consistent and ensuring that the true north is not forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I've breached my time, so in closing, I'd just like to say that in order to deliver this just and equitable transition of energy, we cannot forget partnerships, and this is what we are here for. The time to compete is probably done and over with, given the huge and massive undertaking and the huge capital burden and the huge policy shifts required. So, Bapak-bapak dan Ibu-ibu sekalian, saya rasa untuk menutup sedikit kata ini, rasanya kita perlu berkolaborasi dan sepantas mungkin. Dengan itu saya kembalikan kepada Bapak Andrew.
Thank you. Back Taufik. Thank you very much. I think that was a great sort of overview of the challenges that we are facing, but also the strategic priorities that Petronas is targeting, and also the plans that you're putting in place to try and navigate that energy transition. Okay, now we'll move on to Mr. Roberto Lorato. By way of introduction, Roberto is Director and CEO of MedcoEnergi, has over 30 years experience in the international oil and gas industry across Europe, Central Asia, and of course here, Southeast Asia. Since joining MedcoEnergi in November 2015, the company has expanded its oil and gas and power generation activities, including investments in renewable energy. Born in Italy, Roberto holds a master's from the London Business School, a degree in energy economics from the Scuola Superiore Enrico Mattei, and a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Padova. Please, Roberto.
All right, thank you. So, yeah, as I said, no one is perfect. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's an honor and a pleasure to represent MedcoEnergi in this very distinguished assembly. Thank you, Panjo, for the introduction. And thank you, Nicke and Taufik, for the description of the challenges. I found it fascinating. I don't know about you, but I found it fascinating how two large organizations like Pertamina and Petronas are grappling with this incredibly complex and difficult challenge, which is represented by the energy transition, by trying to balance not just the need to progress the projects, but also to exercise all of their weight in addressing the society requirements and expectations, which obviously is inevitable, is expected, I think, by organizations like Pertamina and Petronas. I'm going to try and stick a little bit closer, or more or less in a more narrow way, to the difficult question that Andrew raised earlier for us. What is a company's strategy pursuing high return of investment? Thank you very much. And helping society meet net zero emissions. Well, I think we all can agree that reaching net zero is going to be a long, complex, possibly difficult, certainly capital intensive, as mentioned by Taufik, journey. And there will be different answers, different approaches that different organizations and people will take. Now, in my case, in the case of MedcoEnergi, the perspective is of a independent, large, yes, but independent private company which has to stay in the market every single day and which has been able to grow, and in order to grow has to be able to continually access private capital and therefore justify, every single investments for its stakeholders, shareholders first of all. So today I'd like to share our experience, how we have achieved over the past 7-8 years a substantial growth, largely through acquisitions in our case, and a little bit about our efforts to address the challenges associated with climate change, as well as our stakeholders' expectations in this journey. Today, MedcoEnergi is a large, independent energy company with 3 key businesses. The traditional oil and gas, where we now operate is some over 300,000 barrels of oil equivalent, 70% of which is gas, in fact. The power generation, starting with gas IPPs, but we also been investing in geothermal, solar PV, mini hydro. And then the third element is a world-class copper and gold mining business managed by Amman Mineral, a separately listed entity with with an independent board, About this last business, we've been asked often, what does a mining business have to do with oil and gas and power generation? Well, our view is that since the main activity of Amman is to produce copper, and copper is a critical resource to support the global push towards energy electrification, well then, our mining business is, in all effects, an important element of our broader energy story, increasingly leaning towards a low-carbon future. And by the way, As some of you may know, Amman has proven to be a very good investment through their very recent, very successful IPO. So, next question. Okay, our strategy. What has been our strategy over the past few years? Since 2018, we've been really pursuing growth, largely through acquisitions, because we realized there were an opportunity for independent companies like ours to acquire producing assets that bigger companies were making available as a result of strategic repositioning around the globe. So actually we have become an aggregator of large producing fields to which we had then added value by extending the life through operational efficiencies, fast-track developments, selective exploration. We have established a proven track record in executing this strategy, supported by our specific technical operational skills and our ability to raise capital and close large, complex financial transactions with prime international partners. In all these years, our exposure to capital markets are continuing to increase. And today, the number of investors that are associated with our growth story are in the number of hundreds, not just shareholders, but to a very large extent, international investors that we approach when we raise global bonds. But our strategy has also been to expand clean and renewable energy. And to this purpose, we have elected MedcoPower as our platform for investment in geothermal, solar, hydro. And then again, we just mentioned earlier the Amman story. So if we leave Amman's success story aside, how have we scored against our stated strategy? Next slide, please. Well, we have over the years greatly increased our oil and gas production. Only in the last 5 years, we almost doubled. We also substantially increased our capacity of power generation, which today is around 30% contributed by renewables. Through exploration and accelerated investments, we have extended the economic life of our assets. And in fact, in this period, we almost doubled our 2P reserves base, with an average funding, development, and acquisition cost, which is very, very attractive, less than $7 per barrel. So through these initiatives, we've really been aiming to be an aggregator of existing producing assets and then extend the life of assets and infrastructure to maximize for the company and for our stakeholders the value of those assets. And at the same time, we also managed to maintain a world-class safety performance, and I'm very pleased to report we've been able to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 22% over the last few years against the base year 2019. Methane emission by 40%. In all of these activities, initiatives, investments, efficiencies, we also been very proactively looking, engaging, trying to improve our initiatives in terms of environmental, social, governance. And, you know, I'm glad to see that our ESG initiatives are today well recognized by international ESG rating agencies. In fact, our ratings for ESG today compare quite favorably within the industry. We are currently rated in the top quartile worldwide, which for a company that started on a relatively small footprint in the pure oil and gas is quite, I think, an achievement. Yes, we are very proud of those achievements, and those achievements are actually being very well received by financial institutions and investors. This to say that if you do it right, you can do both the traditional oil and gas power investments, invest in ESG, invest in emissions, work on ESG profile, and being rewarded, acknowledged and rewarded by investors and shareholders. And shareholders actually, hopefully, are quite pleased with their 20% annual average return since 2018. So, what is next? And this is my last slide. In the world in general, and the Southeast Asia in particular, as already very well articulated by Taufik and Ibu Nicke, energy demand will continue to grow in support of economic and social development. In other words, energy transition continues to be fundamentally very important, but investment in hydrocarbons is also needed to meet our ever-rising energy demand, at least for the next 20, 30 years, I believe. Within this context, our core business remains to continue supplying affordable and sustainable energy. And in the meantime, also aiming to reach Scope 1 and 2 net zero by 2050. Therefore, concluding, MedcoEnergi will continue to pursue growth and value-focused energy transition by decarbonizing our operations, expanding our gas portfolio as a transition fuel, increasing exposure to renewables through investments in larger scale geothermal and PV projects, some of which you may have heard of. And yes, we will also build expertise in low carbon energy, CCS, LNG, hydrogen. And we intend to do all of this while continue to pursue ESG excellence, since I believe that as a company, we will be judged for what we deliver, but we will also be judged by how and how responsibly we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Roberto. Thank you very much. I think very interesting that you highlighted your investments in the gold and copper business. Wood Mackenzie sees some of those future-facing metals as perhaps a key barrier to the energy transition, given the amount of those precious metals will be required if you think about electrification. So that is a whole other conference. We don't want to talk about the complexities out with our oil and gas space too much, otherwise our heads will be scrambled. But thank you very much. So you have heard from our panelists, you've heard their views on the strategies that they're employing and the challenges that we're facing. We'd love to hear from the audience. So if you do have any questions that you would like to send in, we have some time now to answer a couple of questions. And I'd like to kick off perhaps with Ibu Nicke first, and maybe this is something that Pak Taufik can also chip in on, in terms of the objectives of a national oil or a national energy company will be different to those of an independent company such as that helmed by Pak Roberto. In terms of those differences between an NOC or an IOC's priorities or how you develop the strategy, can you share with us a little bit more around how you view those differences and how that impacts the strategies that you develop?
Thank you, Andrew. So as a state-owned enterprise, by law, we have 5 objectives. Profitability is just one of the objectives. So the other four is become a drivers or locomotive of energy in national industrial growth. So we have to bring them to the highest level, increasing the industrial or local content of Indonesia through our CAPEX and OPEX. So the second, we are a company that have a mandate to implement the public service obligation. So 80% of our fuel distribution is fuel subsidy. So there is the price policy from the government, and the subsidy applied to the people. And the third one is we have to also develop the small medium enterprise, and we have to start the new innovation when the private sector maybe put that as a high risk, but as a stand enterprise, we have to execute that one. For example, the new technology, the new energy, the new and renewable energy that Indonesia have a huge potential. So there is a big difference between state-owned enterprise and the private sector. We not only just pursuing the increasing our profitability only, but there is also the other mandate. So that's why when we take a look our Indonesia Energy Triangular Index, the worst score, if you take a look, there is energy accessibility and energy affordability. We are far fall behind the global average. So in our program for the next 5 and 10 years, we focus to develop the infrastructure, to strengthening our accessibility, energy accessibility. Pak Taufik mentioned that there is still a lot of people that have no accessibility to the clean energy. And about the affordability, we have also to apply the advanced technology on how we can increase the productivity. For example, we have to double our production in upstream. With the existing situation in Indonesia, and there is still a lot of potential, but takes time and need very huge investment for that. But we will try our best to double the capacity with CapEx allocation around 62% to achieve the self-sufficiency of crude oil of Indonesia. And so all our priority is to support the energy resiliency of Indonesia. That is our first priority. To achieve 7% economic growth rate per year, need a lot of energy. And with the population growth, with the increasing demand, so we have to provide that with affordable, accessible, and sustainable. So there's our strategy. And we allocate 15% for the low carbon business. Since as a company, we also have to support the government target to achieve net zero emission by 2060. So we have a huge allocation for CCS and bioenergy. Why bioenergy? Indonesia have a huge potential in biodiversity. So we will start to unleash our domestic resources to produce the energy. So Indonesia will achieve not only the energy security, but also the energy independency. Thank you.
So I hear there, a very strong supportive role for Indonesia, not only from an energy resilience perspective, but also from the longer term sort of transition plans.
Yeah.
And I guess that's similar for Petronas in Malaysia. I will shift the question for you slightly. You mentioned the trillions of dollars that are going to be required, and we hear a lot about what operators want from governments and what governments are looking for from operators. What about the finance sector? What about the investors? What about the expectations that they have of governments and operators? Is there something, what do the operators or governments need to expect from the finance sector?
Andrew, I think you've just opened a can of worms. If you've done any tracking of my prior appearance on panels, this is a question that opens up the animosity between myself and the financial institutions that proclaim they're here to back the energy transition. So what you hear next may be sounding rather harsh or rough, but those of you who remember in our neck of the woods, Andrew, in Glasgow, when GFANZ was announced, when $130 trillion of assets under management was set aside, I challenge the audience and I challenge governments around the world to ask yourselves how much of that money has actually made it into adaptation and transition financing. The problem that we have is exactly what you pointed out. We are going to be asking financial institutions to make an inherently risky investment in emerging economies using technologies which have not been proven in a climate where policies have yet to mature. The credit committees sitting in these various banks and lending institutions and investors, whatever form of a risk spectrum, whatever point of the risk spectrum you pick, they will find fault, and therefore there will be a risk premium associated with this. In an already elevated interest rate environment, that's why I said one of the home truths that the industry has been continuously grappling with is capital goes where returns can be generated. If the returns hurdles are lifted to an extent where it makes it unbearable or an impossible barrier to invest in emerging economies, they will lag behind. Which is why your opening statement around this managing of where we should be versus a Paris Agreement, the context of raising a multi-megawatt floating solar or new offshore wind facility in Europe is very different, vastly different from raising the same kind of financing, in this part of the world. To make matters worse, there is this growing and I think mistaken belief that anywhere in the tropics you will get enough sunshine to give you a suntan over Christmas. But the reality is irradiance is not constant. The access to, well, Indonesia is blessed with geothermals. We aren't in Malaysia. Thailand and Vietnam has probably some offshore wind potential. We aren't that equally blessed in Malaysia. But the energy demand centers and the supply nodes available to tap on RE, which is inherently intermittent, is also an issue. There is no one single grid, which I hope our friend Roberto is going to help us with more copper in the region. That is also a question which has failed to be adequately answered by policymakers as well as financial institutions. I closed out by saying this is an age for collaboration and partnerships. I meant it. No one single company or no one country has the balance sheet or the policy and the political wherewithal to do this alone. And I think if there's one thing we've learned, if we're going to avert any part of that energy trilemma so rightly put by Ibu Nicke as a breaking point, we need to work together, and it needs to be done yesterday, really.
Yeah, thank you. And I think perhaps the expectations within Asia are different from other places, and therefore the approach needs to be adapted. Now, I think we're coming towards the end of time, and if I had one job as a moderator, apart from dispensing IT advice, then it was to ensure that this panel runs on time. But I'm going to throw that out the window, and I'm going to perhaps picking up on the theme that Taufik was talking about there, and maybe go to Roberto for the final question around, as an independent listed operator, as an Indonesian player, you obviously have a duty to support Indonesia's decarbonization, but at the same time you have a duty to your shareholders. How do you sort of manage that tension? Where does the priority ultimately end up? Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, first of all, let me say that I can only second and agree with the way Nicke and Taufik described the complexity. Energy transition is a fundamentally need that we need to pursue, but it is capital intensive. It is extraordinarily complex to change an energy system in a few years' time. It will require new technologies. And by the way, moving to electrification economy means having in place robust electricity grids that, especially in this part of the world, are today non-existent. So it's a question, especially for an emerging economy, of a lack of physical infrastructure. It will get there, but still not maybe comparable to what Europeans have. And also a lack of soft infrastructure, the policies, the incentives, the access to capital. So all of this makes this very complex, and definitely there's not going to be any success unless all of the key players around the globe understand and appreciate that different countries, different parts of the globe will have to move at a different speed and sometimes with different approaches. But then again, the key to success is really partnership and collaboration, as Taufik very well explained. Now, we as a smaller player, and thanks God, listening to you, I was going to say, I don't have to manage such a complex agenda. As a smaller player, we understand all of this, but then we focus obviously on the opportunities that we see in front of us. We assess those opportunities. We dialogue with bigger companies like yours, with your authorities and the like, and then we try and find the commercial terms, the operational feasibilities that could make those projects viable. Now, what Taufik is saying is true. I mean, at the end of the day, capital will go where the return is attractive. But also likely for us, the investors are not just homogeneous bunch of people. Actually, investors are very different. They have very different risk appetite. Some of them may have even higher social responsibilities than others. So there is a lot that when you invest and you explore the capital markets, you will find. And in our experience, we've seen that actually having built a positive ESG trajectory has helped us maintaining access to global capital. Still, we need to deliver projects which are economic, and we need to be able to provide a decent return to those investments. So how do we do it? Well, if I had to compare an investment in the oil and gas with an investment in power renewable, well, yes, power renewables is a utility. It is treated as a utility, even though, let me say, sometimes the risk is not that smaller than the oil and gas. And then, okay, then you need, the way we do it, it's just an act of balancing. You look at the two projects, each project has to be able to stand on its own legs, has to be able to walk in its own legs. The oil and gas, we understand very well the risk profile. We need to expect, we understand the market's volatility. For our utility project, we will have to accept a lower project rate of return. But then the benefit of the way you approach it, you say, okay, well then, let's look at different sources of funding for different projects, depending on their typology. And then, yes, you will find that actually today we are is a little bit easier to raise money for a solar project than it is for an oil and gas. Okay. Or then, what you do then, you look at the project financing, and you tend to apply the project financing which is tailored around that project. And what you need then to preserve is the equity component, which is the one that you use to reward your shareholders. I don't know if I explained.
Yeah, no, I think, as you say, different projects will generate different rates of return, will have different risk return requirements, and that is what is going to govern the projects that you take forward. I think we're sort of all out of time, so I'd like to sort of thank the panelists for their views today. I think we've heard about the complexity of the challenges that today's leading oil and gas operators are facing. We've heard of the strategies that are being deployed to try and support that longer-term transition. But I think we've also heard of some of the concerns from the operators and the investors and what they're looking for to be able to make this decarbonisation a success, whilst also supporting Indonesia's energy resilience. So if you'd like to give the panel a warm round of applause, I'd like to conclude today's panel session.
Thank you very much, Bapak Andrew Harwood, for leading the discussion. And today we certainly had a very thoughtful presentation, also discussions and intriguing insights as well from all of our respectable speakers here. On behalf of the committee, we would like to thank all of our guests and speakers for attending this session. And now we would like to have memento given by the committee to all of our speakers as well as our moderator. And for this, we would like to invite Bapak Greg Holman and Bapak Ronald Gunawan to give memento to our distinguished speakers and moderator. We appreciate all of our insights that we had from our speakers, and thank you as well, our moderator, for leading the discussion. And now let's seize this moment as we have photo session together. Allow me to count down before you pose for the picture in 1, 2, 3, and one more time. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, moderator. You may return to your seat. And let's give a big round of applause one more time for all of our speakers and moderator for the CEO Forum, Company Strategy, Pursuing High Return of Investment and Helping Society Meet Net Zero Emission. And now, delegates, kindly stay in Nusantara room and please still be seated as we'll continue with our next session with a topic that is not less interesting: oil and gas industry transformation to support achieving 1 million BOPD and 12 BSCFD gas by 2030 and longer-term decarbonization target. That session will begin very shortly, so please kindly remain in the ballroom and be seated. We'll be back shortly.